Hello students, I am Dr. M. Bhushanam, Assistant Professor in the Department of Zoology, Maharani Science College for Women, Bangalore. Hope all is well. Take care of your good health during this pandemic time. Well students, today we are going to understand another topic in non-Core 1 of your syllabus, that is excretory system in earthworm species, that is Pharyngeal posthuma. Objectives of today's study is to study the structural organization of excretory system in the earthworm and to study the physiology of excretion in the earthworm. Content includes the excretory system of the earthworm species Pharyngeal posthuma. Well, in every living organism, the food that enters into every cell undergoes oxidation or breakage to liberate the energy during the digestion process, that is intracellular digestion. After the energy is released, the end products of this intracellular digestion in every cell predominantly consists of the nitrogenous waste like ammonia and their products. If this nitrogenous waste remain in the cells, it becomes toxic or poison to the organism. So, there is a physiological system that take care of these toxic substances of nitrogenous waste, and it helps in the removal of these excretory products, and this system is called as the excretory system. So, excretory system refers to the physiological system which will remove the toxic nitrogenous waste products that are formed after the intracellular digestion in the body of organisms. In case of Pharyngeal posthuma species of earthworm, we do find a very well organized excretory system for the removal of these nitrogenous waste products. The excretory system in case of Pharyngeal performs two major functions. Function number one is the major or chief function of removal of excretory waste of nitrogenous products, and the second one is to maintain the concentration and volume of the body fluids, which we call it as the osmoregulation process. So, the nitrogenous waste products are the chief functions, removal of the nitrogenous waste products are the chief function of the excretory system along with the process of osmoregulation. Now, in Pharyngeal, the excretory products of nitrogenous waste initially will be in the form of ammonia, and later it is converted into the urea products, and it is expelled out or removed out from the body. So, the excretory product that comes out of the body of Pharyngeal is said to be urea. Hence, the earthworms are called as ureotelic organisms because their excreta is of urea. Then, which are the structures of the excretory system in case of the earthworm that helps in the removal of the excretory waste? When we look at here in this slide, You can find a tube which is highly coiled, appears to be spirally coiled on an axis. Something similar to this, tubular structures which are highly coiled, internally ciliated, lining of the structures are referred as nephridia or nephridium singular. So, they are unit structures present in the excretory system of the earthworm that helps in the removal of the excretory waste are called as nephridium or nephridia, are also referred as micro-meta-nephridia. So, these are all these synonyms for these tubular structures which is highly coiled, removes the urea as the excretory product from the body of pharyngeal, which we call it as nephridia, micro-meta-nephridia, or a nephridium in singular. These tubular, highly coiled tubular structures called nephridia are said to be ectodermal in origin. Mean to say, during their development, the outer layer of outer germ layer, that is ectoderm, involves in the formation of the nephridial structures. Well, these nephridial structures, if are very small in size, we call them as micronephridia. Micro means small. So, if the nephridia are small, we call them as micronephridia. If the nephridia are larger in size, we call them as macronephridia or metanephridial structures. So, metanephridia or macronephridia refers to the large sized nephridia. If they are of small size, we call them as micronephridial type. In case of earthworm, we find both the types, both micro and metanephridial types. Hence, the nephridia are called as micro-metanephridial type. And these nephridial structures are present throughout the body or segments in earthworm, except for first 2 or 3 segments depending on the species. In case of Pharyngeal postuma, first 2 segments do not have this highly coiled tubular structures called nephridia in it. Well, students, now we shall understand the other types of nephridia. We classify the first type based on their size, and we have learnt that there are 2 types, micro and metanephridial types. There are other ways of classifying the nephridial types also. When I say it is a tubular structure, it will be elongated tube which is highly coiled, twisted, as what you see in the image of the slide here. When I say tube, it will have a central space which we call it as lumen or cellular cavity. So, this tube has got 2 ends. End 1 is at anterior side, end 2 is at posterior side. Students, similar way you find the structural details even for the nephridium. A nephridium which is highly coiled tubular structure shows 2 openings, one towards anterior side, the other one towards posterior side. The one which is towards anterior side is called as nephrostome or nephrotome. So, nephrotome or nephrostome refers to the anterior opening of the nephridium. The second opening is present towards the posterior side, which we call it as Nephrodiopore. So, Nephrodiopore refers to the opening of posterior side, and nephrostome refers to the opening of anterior side. Stoma here refers to the mouth. So, usually mouth is present towards anterior side. So, anterior opening of the nephridium is called as nephrostome or nephrotome. Now, based on the structure of nephrotome, we have nephridium divided into two types, open and closed types. In case of open type of nephridium, a typical nephrostome will be present for the nephridial structure. So, if the nephridium is present at the anterior end, you can call otherwise the nephridium as open type nephridium. If it is absent, if the nephrostome or nephrotome is absent, then you call such type of nephridia as closed type of nephridia. Students, remember, nephrostome refers to anterior end opening of the nephridia. If it is present, we call it as open type, and if it is absent, we call it as closed type. So, this is in relation to nephrostome, the first type of classification. The second type of classification that we have here is based on the posterior opening, that we call it as Nephrodiopore. Students, in case of earthworm, the Nephrodiopore may directly communicate with the outside the body surface, that is external environment. Sometimes the same Nephrodiopore will open into their digestive system. If the Nephrodiopore directly communicates with the external environment, we call it as ectonephric nephridia. Ecto means outside. It is also referred as exonephric nephridia. Exo also refers to outside. So, if the nephridial opening of Nephrodiopore, that is the posterior opening, if it is opening towards the outer surface, directly communicating, we call it as ectonephric nephridia. Sometimes what happens is that the nephridial pores will open into the digestive tract of the animals. So, the waste will be thrown into the digestive tract. If that is the situation, we call those nephridial type as enteronephric nephridia. So, entero means inside, within. Ecto means outside. So, the Nephrodiopore, if it opens into the digestive tract itself, we call it as enteronephric nephridia. If it opens outside to the external surface with the help of the body wall, we call it as ectonephric nephridia. So, these are the types of nephridia based on the Nephrodiopore structure. So, we have learnt about their size. Then, based on the position of presence and absence of nephrostome, we have open and closed type. Based on the position and presence and absence of communication, we have enteronephric and ectonephric nephridia, and we have another type of classification, and this is based on the position of nephridia in the body of earthworm. So, this is the major classification that in most textbooks you find. So, this type of classification is based on the nephridial position. In simple, we can say the location where the nephridia are present, we have the three types of nephridia. So, first one is pharyngeal nephridia, as it says that, name says here, pharyngeal refers to pharynx. So, this nephridia will open into the pharynx region. The next one we have integumentary nephridia, where integument refers to the skin or body wall. So, this nephridial type are present in the body wall of segments in the earthworm. The third type is septal nephridia or typical nephridia. Septum refers to a partition that divides between two segments. So, you know, annelids are the segmented bodied organisms. So, between two segments, you find a partition which we call it as septum. There are certain types of nephridia which are present in this septal region. So, they are called as septal nephridia, and they are also called as typical nephridia because they will have all the basic parts or structures required for a nephridium. So, if all the parts of a nephridium is present in any nephridium, we call it as typical nephridium. So, septal nephridia are generally referred as typical nephridia. Here, understand students, here they have all the parts of a nephridium in it. So, beside towards the right side in the slide, you have an image showing the three types of nephridia. So, the bunches of three pairs that are seen between fourth, fifth and sixth segments. So, they are called pharyngeal nephridia. Then next we have representation from seventh segments down. You have dots representing in every segment. They are called as integumentary nephridia because it is present in the body wall of every segment. So, it will start from seventh end till the last segment. Then the third type of nephridia is called septal nephridia. You can see between 15th and 16th segments in the diagram, there is a septum, and the septum is demarked by the darker dots or points which refers to the septal nephridial structures, which will start from the septum of 15th to 16th till the last segment. Hope the concept is clear here, students. Now, we shall understand that these types of nephridia based on their position and location in detail. The first one to start is pharyngeal nephridia. These nephridia are present on either sides of the digestive tract between the segments 4, 5 and 6, and some of their parts are also communicated in the digestive tract part of segment 2 and 3. Students, remember, there are 3 pairs localized between 4th, 5th and 6th segments. This nephridia generally appears in clusters or bunches. Hence, they are called as tufted nephridia. Tuft refers to a bunch. So, tufts of pharyngeal nephridia are seen as 3 pairs in the segment number 4, 5 and 6 as what you see in the diagram here. And these nephridia are said to be, not only appears in bunches, they are said to be closed type. When we say closed type, you remember in the previous slide we have learned that closed type of nephridia do not have the presence of nephrostome or nephrotome. So, hence, here the pharyngeal nephridia do not have any of the nephrostomes in it. Hence, we call them as closed type of nephridia. The speciality of this nephridia is the 4th segment nephridial pairs of pharyngeal type will open their Nephrodiopore and ducts into the 4th segmental digestive tract itself. So, here in the picture when you look at the 4th segmental pharyngeal nephridial tufts or clusters open into their ducts, and those ducts or tubes will open into their digestive tract of portion in the segment 4 itself. So, when they open their nephridiopores into the digestive tract, we have understood they are called as enteronephric nephridia. So, remember, they are enteronephric nephridial type also. Remember, the pharyngeal nephridia are 3 pairs present in 4th, 5th and 6th segments. They do not have a nephrostome, hence are called as a closed type of nephridium, and their ducts will open into their digestive tract, hence they are called as enteronephric nephridium, as what you see in the diagram down here. Now, the opening is very specific, related to the pharyngeal nephridia and the digestive tract. The fourth segmental nephridia of pharyngeal type will open into fourth segment itself, and fifth segmental nephridia also opens into the fourth segment itself, whereas the sixth segmental pharyngeal nephridia pairs will open their ducts into the second segment, that is the buccal chamber. So, all the types of pharyngeal nephridia are closed type and also said to be enteronephric type. What is the necessity of these nephridial types to open their nephridial ducts into the digestive tract? Otherwise, why is that these pharyngeal nephridia are throwing their nitrogenous waste into the digestive tract? The main function is to conserve the water loss. Okay. So, we know that the earthworm species of Pharyntima is said to be terrestrial, lives in a damp soil areas. So, in the superficial layers of the earth, and these earthworms require to conserve more of water, because they require a moist skin for the respiration, cutaneous respiration, and for the physiological activities also they require the water. So, the water is conserved in the body. So, for this process, wastage of water is controlled by this kind of system of pharyngeal nephridia that they have. So, that is about the importance of the first type of nephridia called pharyngeal nephridia. The second type of nephridia we have is integumentary nephridia. Integument means body wall or the skin. So, these nephridia are present from 7th segment to the last segment of the body. In the body wall or the integument of every segment. Students, here when we look at, their number is between 200 to 250 in every segment. So, you know that they start from 7th segment to the last segment. In every segment, the number of integumentary nephridia present is between 200 to 250 present in the outer body wall or the surface of the skin. This number will differ in the segment number 14, 15 and 16. We have understood that if from 7th segment to the last segment, in every segment the number is between 200 to 250. But this number of 200 to 250 will vary in the segments of 14, 15 and 16th. You know that those three segments forms the clitellum region in Pharyntima. So, there in every segment of 14, 15 and 16 of clitellar region, the number of nephridia are 10 times more than that of the usual nephridial number in these segments. So, when we multiply 200 to 250 with 10, it becomes 2000 to 2500. So, the number of nephridia in 14th segment, 15th segment, 16th segments, in each of the segment it will be between 2000 to 2500. So, this clitellum will have huge number of thousands of nephridia of integumentary type in it. Hence, clitellum is commonly called as forest of nephridia. So it is a very important question for objective type. So which part of which part of earthworm is called as forest of nephridia? It is the clitellum region. So this nephridia type that we find in clitellum is integumentary nephridia. What is their number? It ranges in every segment 2000 to 2500. Students, this integumentary nephridia are small in size. So their number is more, size is small. So because of the small size, we call them as micronephridia. And also, they do not have the anterior opening of nephrostome. So what name can we suggest for it? Closed type. So it is micronephridial type, it is closed type. And this kind of nephridia will have their body wall, nephridia have their nephrodiopore opens directly to the outer surface of the body. So all the excretory waste of the body are thrown from the coelomic space to the body outside through the nephrodiopores presence, and hence they are called as ectonephric or exonephric nephridia. Students, remember, they discharge their nitrogenous waste, the products of the excretory system are thrown out of the body through the pores of nephrodiopores which are present on the body wall. So hence they are called as exonephric nephridia. So three terms that we will have to remember related to the integumentary nephridia in pharyngeal. Number one, it is micronephridia, so because of its small size. Number two, it is closed type. It doesn't have nephrostome. Number three, we call it as exonephric nephridia or ectonephric nephridia because they have the nephrodiopores directly opening to the surface of the body. So that's about the importance of the second type of nephridia called integumentary nephridia. Well, the third type of nephridia present in the body of earthworm are called septal nephridia, are also called as typical nephridia, or also otherwise referred as intersegmental septal nephridia. So you know, in between two segments there is septum, so you call it as intersegmental nephridia. Now they are present starting from the septum between 15th and 16th to the last segment. So they start at the septum region of 15 to 16 and it will move till the last segment. And when you look at the structural details of a septum, it is the partition that divides two segments. So when I look at one segment, it will have an upper septum and a lower septum. So two septae will enclose the space of one segment, or otherwise between two segments there is one septum. Now why is this understanding we need to have here? It is because in each of the septum there are 40 to 50 septal nephridiae which are arranged in two rows. Okay, so every septum will have thereby 80 to 100 number of septal nephridia, and their number for every segment, when we look at, you have two septae. Remember students, in each septum you have 40 to 50 number of nephridia, septal nephridia, arranged in two rows. Mean to say it will be totally together 80 to 100. Whereas of a segment, when you consider, you have two septae, the upper and lower. So altogether around 200 number of nephridia are present per segment of the body. So per septum it is 100 number of septal nephridia, and per segment where it includes two septae, it will be double, that is 200 septal nephridia it corresponds to. Now these nephridiae are said to be larger in size. Because of the larger size, they are called as macronephridia or metanephridia. So the size of the nephridia is larger in size. So the other two types what we have understood early, they are micronephridia. So earthworm has all the types, micro, meta, nephridia together. Hence the nephridial type is called micrometanephridia, as what we have seen in slide 1. Well students, this nephridial has got both the openings of the anterior and posterior side, which is not a characteristic feature of the first two, that is pharyngeal and integumentary nephridia. It is only in this type of septal nephridia or typical nephridium you have both the openings of nephrostome at anterior side, and hence it is called open type, and the nephridiopore is present towards the posterior side, and this posterior nephridiopore will open into the digestive tract again, that is intestinal part of the digestive tract. Hence it is called enteronephric nephridia. So what is the speciality of septal nephridia? They are large in size, hence they are called macronephridia. They are said to be having the presence of nephrostome. Remember students, this is the only type of nephridium type that has the nephrostome in it. So the rest two doesn't have. So the presence of nephrostome is seen for this type of nephridial types referred as septal nephridia, and hence it is called as open type. And the opening of nephridiopore is directed towards the intestinal tract, hence it is called enteronephric nephridia. Macronephridia or metanephridia, then it is open type of nephridia. It is also referred as enteronephric nephridia. So septal nephridia of earthworm is said to be possessing the structure of nephrostome in it. So it is open type. This is the only type of nephridia which is said to be open type in the excretory system of the earthworm. It is called as a typical nephridium. Why are we calling it as typical nephridium? It will have all the basic structures that is required for a nephridium. So when you look at a typical nephridium, it shows presence of three basic structures. Number one, the anterior region, it has the opening of coiled tubulated area, we call it as nephridiostome or nephrostome. Then the next part is the coiled tubular area referred as the body, and the third part we call it as the posterior terminal duct that ends up with the opening of nephridiopore. So the anterior nephridiostome, then it includes the body and the posterior terminal duct with the nephridiopore are the three major parts of a typical nephridium. So a typical nephridium is corresponding to a septal nephridium. So remember, in the examinations, if they ask you to describe a septal nephridium, you will have to describe the same structure. If they ask you to describe a typical nephridium, then too you will have to describe the same structure. Students, here is a picture in this slide that we can see a typical nephridium or a septal nephridium. The diagram, this diagram you may have to practice for your examination. Fine. So down here in the picture, you can see a round or funnel shaped mouth and nephridiostome that continues down as a short tube called the neck that is shaded with black color here, indicating the ciliated lining of the inner cavity or coelomic cavity that gets twisted to form the body and comes out at last to form the terminal duct. So this is about the importance of the major parts of the typical nephridium. Now, we shall understand each of these parts of a typical nephridium one by one. The first part to start with is nephridiostome or nephrostome. Generally, the nephridiostome or nephrostome refers to the anterior opening of the nephridial structure. It is a funnel shaped structure which is externally ciliated. So it is a funnel shaped structure which we will call it as nephrostome region. Generally, when you look at a funnel, you have a wide mouth. Mouth has got a rim. This rim is here referred as a marginal region. So this rim portion of a funnel, we call it as a margin. So here the margin of the nephrostome is formed with the cells which we call it as marginal cells. These marginal cells are divided into two types. Number one, the upper cellular layer of margin we call it as the upper lip, and down you have one more layer called as a lower lip. So the upper lip is made up of 8 to 9 marginal cells which are all ciliated. You can find the ciliated cells towards the upper lip, whereas the lower lip is made up of 4 to 5 number of cells which are non-ciliated. So this is how you differentiate marginal cells into ciliated, non-ciliated region, which we call it otherwise as upper lip and lower lip. So they corresponds to the outer surface. The importance of the ciliated cells of the margin is they are dispensed into the coelomic cavity surrounding the coelomic fluid. So what they do is these ciliated cells beat their cilia and absorbs the coelomic fluid into this structure of nephridia. So this is about the margin of the funnel shaped nephrostome. Now at the center, this space, this mouth space is covered by one cell which we call it as central cell. So there is a central cell that covers the mouth and marginal cells forms the lip region. Now the ciliated cells of the margin will allow coelomic fluid to enter into the central cell, and this central cell will absorb that nutrients and the fluid matter, and that will be sent down into a cavity which we call it as the coelomic cavity of the nephrostome, which we otherwise refer it as the mouth cavity. So this widened mouth, when you look at a funnel, the wide area will move down as a narrow tube. This narrow stem portion, which we here call it as the neck region. Students, remember, neck is also a tubular structure with a cavity inside. This inner cavity is provided with a lining of ciliated cell. So similar to that of an appearance of funnel, the structure of nephrostome also appears to be. So above this slide, towards the right side is the actual structural details of the nephrostome seen. Now, the second part of the the nephridia that follows the region of nephrostome is referred as body. The body structure is the main tubular part of the nephridium. This body, when we look at, we have the neck which is made up of single tube. This single tube will now break into, a single tube now will break into 9 to 13 number of small tubes. So a single tube will have now a partition into 9 to 13 number of small tubules, and all these tubules will remain together. These tubules now start showing a spiral arrangement or twisted arrangement, and they move upward direction. And again they form another kind of a spiral arrangement and move down. After moving down, all these three tubules again reunite back to form a single tube, as like that of the neck region. That single tube will have the opening which we call it as Nephrodiopore. So you will have to imagine a concept by looking at the picture here. The neck, which is single tube, will break into 9 to 13 number of tubules. Those tubules will have twisting. After the end, towards the posterior side, again there is reunion of all these tubules to form a single tube bag, and that tube will show the opening of Nephrodiopore. So this is how the arrangement of body structure is. And the body, when we look at, it consists of two major parts. Part number one is twisted lobe, because all these tubules will show twisting like a spiral twist. The second part is called straight lobe or straight loop. In most of the books and texts you find straight lobe or loop structure, okay, described as a picture as non-twisted area. So the non-twisted area of the body part we call it a straight lobe or straight loop. The twisted part we call it as twisted loop structure. Now we shall understand these details one by one. First, to start with, is long twisted loop with a narrow apical lobe. We know that the neck region, you can follow the diagram that is given down as I explained. The neck region that continues from the nephrostome is single tubular structure. Now that breaks into 9 to 13 number of tubules, and this 13 number of tubules will be moving together as a bundle. So they show the upright movement. They move upward, but not in a straight way. They twist and move. They spirally twist and move. So this twisting of the tubules that moves upward is called as proximal limb or proximal twisted loop. So this proximal means towards the upper side. So it is moving upper side. So they move upward and they further show another spiral movement towards the head region, that is the neck nephrostome region, which we call it as apical part. So proximal loop that shows twisting, then it shows towards the neck region or the head region, it shows another twist which we call it as apical lobe or apical loop that moves back, and they coil around the proximal loop and move down. When they move down towards the neck, we call it as a distal twisted loop. So we have proximal twisted loop moving upward, apical loop moving towards the nephrostome, and again moves back and twists down. That downward movement of tubules we call it as distal twisted loop. Those twisted loops down near the neck region, as they reach, they form a straight lobe or straight loop, inside which all these tubules will join and shows a kind of turns or looping. So turns or loops are seen within the straight loop or straight lobe. Afterwards, they all reunite to form a single tube. That single tube comes out as terminal duct that will show the opening of Nephrodiopore. Now, the second part, as I explained you earlier, is the straight lobe. So there is no twist coiling. Instead, it will be straight. But the tube shows looping inside, curving inside. It is a short tubular area seen just above the nephrostome or neck region. Now, we have also understood the terminal duct is the posterior most part of the nephridium, which is a short tube, ciliated terminal duct that will open outside through the opening of Nephrodiopore. Students, since we are talking about a typical nephridium, the opening of Nephrodiopore here is attached to the region of intestine towards the anterior. So we call it a supraintestinal excretory duct. So they are the openings through which this waste of the nephridia are dumped into the intestinal portion of the organism, as you see in the diagram towards the right side of the slide. Well, this septal nephridia helps in the removal of urea as the nitrogenous waste products, and it is dumped into the lumen or the cavity of intestine through the supraintestinal excretory duct openings, and hence this nephridia are also called as enteronephric nephridia. Now, after we understanding the structural details of the excretory system in earthworm, that is the structural details of nephridia, now we shall concentrate on physiology of excretion. Generally, the physiology of excretion, to understand, we need to know the structural details of nephridia that we have done already. Nephridia are provided richly with the blood capillaries, and these capillaries will allow their content or coelomic fluid to enter into the nephrostome, and in the nephrostome the coelomic fluid that gets collected is sent into the neck. In the neck there is reabsorption process. The rest of waste is thrown into the twisted lobe as well as the straight lobes. Why there is requirement of a twisted lobe and a straight lobe that shows the curves? Why is this curvature so many present in the nephridial structure? It is to allow the coelomic fluid inside very slowly, so that reabsorption of nutrients, reabsorption of water predominantly is done along with the excretory products. So thereby, whatever the water that it requires the organism further for their physiological activities is reabsorbed. Also, the nutrients present in the coelomic fluid, instead of throwing it out, it will be reabsorbed. For the easier reabsorption, there is slow movement of the coelomic fluid is seen within the cavity of nephridial tubes, both in twisted and apical lobes. So what happens here? Reabsorption process takes place. Ultimately, whatever the waste is left out will contain predominantly 40% of urea, 20% of ammonia, rest 40% relates to the amino acids and other nitrogenous wastes. Thereby, the urea as the predominant nitrogenous waste that is thrown out by the animal, and hence it is called ureotelic organisms. Now, the actual physiological process when we look at, as I explained you, the beating action of cilia of nephrostome will attract the fluid, coelomic fluid matter to enter into the nephrostome. As I explained you, the ciliary structures surrounding the marginal cells will absorb the coelomic fluid, and it will be sent into the central cell. The central cell will allow that fluid matter to enter into the neck region through the coelomic cavity. And now, from the neck, it will reach into the twisted loops of proximal, apical lobe, then back into distal tube, from there distal twisted loop, from there into straight lobe or straight loop, from there the reabsorption process takes place ultimately. Now, by the time the excretory products reaches the straight lobe or straight loop, the ammonia will be converted into, or ammonial products will be converted into urea. So in this straight lobe, as the excretory waste comes into the terminal duct, it will be in the form of urea. So those urea products will be sent out through the terminal duct. Now, the excretory product that comes out from the terminal duct is thrown into the intestinal part of the organism. So where the undigested food comes out. So the undigested food along with the urea will be expelled out as excreta of the animal. So that's the importance of the nephridial structure here. Now, the urea, which is the rich excretory waste product that acts as the manure for the soil, and hence earthworms and their excretory products are widely used by farmers in the agricultural fields. Earthworms, we call them commonly as the friends of farmers. The reason is that the urea will be added by this earthworm along with their waste into the soil. So, the soil manure abilities or nutrient abilities will be enhanced by the earthworms, hence they are called as farmers' friends. Students, remember now the excretory system of the earthworm consists of 3 types of nephridia: pharyngeal, integumentary, septal nephridia. Septal nephridia are considered as typical nephridia that has parts like nephrostome, neck, proximal twisted loop, apical lobe, then distal twisted loop, then forms apical lobe, a striate lobe. From striate lobe, the tube that comes out is called terminus or terminal duct. The terminal duct will open outside through the opening of the Nephrodiopore that will communicate with the intestine. So, it is called enteronephric nephridia. So, with this we are completing the excretory system related to the earthworm. So, we shall answer few of the MCQs related to this particular session. The major nitrogenous excretory material of the earthworm is urea, that forms 40%. So, answer is C. The enteronephric nephridia of earthworm are present where? Enteronephric nephridia, it is both pharyngeal and septal. So, answer is A. Question 3. Nephrostome occurs only in which of the type? Septal nephridia. So, answer is C. Pharyngeal nephridia of the earthworm occurs in the segment 4, 5 and 6. So, answer is B. The septal and pharyngeal nephridia open into the alimentary canal and are of enteronephric type. What is this adaptation is made for? It is to conserve the water. Answer is A. Nephridia pharyntima are of the type micro and meta nephridia. So, answer is C. So, what have we learned? What is the outcome of today's session? We have understood about the structural organization of the nephridia of excretory system in earthworm, and also we have understood the physiology of excretion in earthworm. References includes web references and book references includes Invertebrate Zoology by Verma and Modern Textbook Zoology by Kotpal. And these are all the links related to the images that we have taken down for the PPT. Well, students, if you find any queries, comments and critiques, please post them to my personal WhatsApp number. I wish you all a very good day ahead. Thank you all.